Hi, Lilith.
Hi, Neha. You're a host, so you have full control.
Cool. Thanks.
All right, so I'll mute, but I'll be here waiting very eagerly for the session.
I'll see you soon. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. And share my screen. Cool. Hello, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the 18th session for SAIMA. And today we are going to talk about going for the CTA as a parent. And this is basically Ask Me Anything session with the CTAs who themselves prepared for CTA as a parent. And we're going to be talking about who they are, where they come from, how did they decide to become a CTA, and how did they manage their family, children, and what were their struggles, how did they cope with it, and their life after becoming a CTA, which is something I'm personally looking forward to after the session. But before even we get started, I would like to let everybody know about who we are. We are a group of architects who support each other in preparing for technical architect certifications by creating and sharing the content that helps for becoming a CTA. And if anybody from you is preparing for the certification, is having any ideas for future sessions or want to volunteer for the sessions, you're always welcome. You can reach out to me, Gaurav, Lilith, Johan, Meera, Henok, or Neha. And we are available on LinkedIn, Twitter, and you can contact us in any ways. Some basic housekeeping rules, please mute yourself. And if you have any questions, put them in the chat and we'll see if we can cover them in the session. If not, we can cover them afterwards as well. And little ultimatum, we are not perfect and neither do we know everything. We'll try to answer your questions at our best. And if you spot a mistake, please let us know and we'll try to correct it. And as I said, if you're interested in hosting, please reach out to us. Everybody is welcome and sharing is caring. So yeah. So about the panelists today. Before we introduce the panelists, I'll just introduce a very short introduction about myself. I'm the host for today. I'll be conducting the session, asking these sessions questions to the panelists today. I myself am a technical architect and on my almost last leg to the journey of CTA. We'll see it in 2 months. And yeah, that's about me. I'm co-leading SAIMA group with Lilith and Meera. And as I said earlier, you can reach out to me or the other leaders and co-leaders anytime you feel there's a question or any ideas to host the events. So that's all about me and SAIMA. The interesting part, let's move on to the panelists today. Let's know who they are. Let's start with Samir. So we'll start with who they are and when did they go for the board, and at that point of time when they were going for the board, what was their family situation, how many children do they had, and what were their ages, and that sort of things. So we'll start with Sam. Hey, Sam.
Sure. Hey, how's it going? Yeah, Sam. I know I'm normally called Samir when I'm in trouble, so yeah, Sam's fine. Sam Wadhwani. I work for PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, as chief architect for our Salesforce practice in the UK. And I also work on our enablement program for CTAs across EMEA. At home, I have a wife who comes from the East Midlands part of England, and 2 young boys under 10 years old who are either running around at 100 miles an hour or asleep. There's no in between. I took my board in November 2020, so fairly recent, and then a 2-section retake in April 21. And I originally heard about CTA in 2013 when I was working with 2 other architects from Salesforce, who were also both on their journeys at the time, John Joseph and Stephen O'Halloran. I have checked with them that they're okay with me using their names. And yeah, it's taken some years. So I first took the board when in 2015, when I actually traveled to San Francisco specifically for the exam. It was about a 30-hour round trip to San Francisco, in the sense that I went there, took the board and came back. I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. And then took it again in 2016 in Staines near London, mainly because it was a free retake, but unsuccessful in both those attempts. I restarted my journey in January 2020 and had a couple of pauses because of unexpected events along the way, such as family health and stuff like that. It probably took me about 11 months, and then the retake took another 2 months from February 21. And I found it difficult, not because of the knowledge or the experience, but more the other challenges that surround it, one of which is what we'll be talking about today.
All right, that must have been quite a time for you, traveling and that to kids back home, and then you're giving a CTA exam. We'll talk about it in detail later. We'll move on to Emily for the round of introduction. Hey, Emily.
Hey, so my name is Emily Patra. I work for Salesforce. When did I go for my boards? I had my first and thank God last attempt at my boards in 2018. And I heard about the CTA for the first time in, I think it was December 2015 or early 2016, after I joined Salesforce. So I don't come from the Salesforce ecosystem. And I joined Salesforce in 2015. And I was going through my onboarding, and as part of the onboarding, I was doing some of the certifications at that time and talking to my peers. And actually, Sam mentioned two of them. I spoke to, Steve and John, know them very well. They were in the same team as me, so talked to them, found out about the CTA from them and other, members who were either preparing for it, and got scary information. Everyone told me, don't worry about it, you've just joined, right? Give it 10 years, right? So no, but the more I heard about it and the more I saw people like Steve and John and how good they were, how much credibility they had, I aspired to be like them. And that's where I started my CTA journey. I took my boards in Munich, like I said, in the summer of or early 2018. And yeah, my motivation to pass it was I didn't want to go through it again. Literally, I tell people that was my only motivation. It was so painful, so excruciatingly painful, that I was like, if I ever have to go through this again, I'm not even sure I'll be able to give it another shot, or the amount of time and the effort invested on it. My son, so I obviously live in Newbury. My son was 6 years old when I was going for the CTA, and he's the only son I have, and obviously at home it's just me and my husband. So yeah, it was quite challenging to manage childcare with the amount of investment you do on top of a day job for a CTA, but that's what we're here to talk about.
Yeah, thanks, Emily. Over to you, Carl. Hi, Carl.
Everyone, my name is Carl Brundage. I'm here on the East Coast in the United States. I work for a company called Otisava, where we do a lot of work with data protection, privacy, archiving, and so forth on top of Salesforce, especially at very large enterprise scales. For me, I went for the board in December of 2017. I did not talk to Steve or John, so they're not an influence on me. But I probably found out about CTA not long after I started working with Salesforce. I started working with Salesforce in the summer of 2014. I went and there was, I think, 6 or 7 certifications total back then. I did all the ones except Advanced Developer and CTA, and it was kind of like, yeah, CTA, that's never going to happen. You take this test and then you do this board and there's nothing in between. So for me, it really changed when the pyramid came out with the designer exams and those stepping stones that can build you to being ready to do something like a review board versus kind of just jumping right in and not knowing what you were getting into. And I think that's something I've seen over the last 8 years is a lot more resources come out of, yes, the technical material, but the preparation material and the 601 class and the 602 and a lot of things that have demystified what the journey and the steps are to be successful there. At the time when I was going through the board, I would have had 4 kids, still do. They would have been ages 3, 5, 7, and 9. So two girls and 2 boys. So we certainly can go into the details of the challenges and reflecting on, doing it when kids are young versus now when my kids are older, 13, 11, 9, and 7. So there definitely are some differences in the time that I'm involved in their activities and how it would impact my ability to do a review board today.
So Carl, when did you go for the board?
December 2017.
2017, okay. All right, so thank you everyone again for joining us today. And I'm really excited to ask you the questions. And also we have a set of questions that we got from our attendees over a set of Google form that we published earlier. And I will be tackling those or asking you those questions and see if we can answer those. And then we can also put some questions in the chat from our audience if they have questions other than what I've asked. So I'll get started, but before that, what I'm proud of today is we have a panel, an interesting panel from different areas. We have a panel from a partner, from Salesforce itself, and from a product, right? So everybody is working in different areas and different mode of Salesforce ecosystem. And we all know, being an architect, it's very important for us to get involved in the project at every step, starting from the discovery to the development or planning, and then to the delivery, like the end-to-end stuff, right? And that often requires traveling. I'm not just talking about traveling for the review board, which you all did because it was pre-COVID, and now just the COVID is just around the corner, and we might have traveling for CTAs getting started by next year or by end of this year. We don't know that yet, but we as architects sometimes need to travel, not just because of the CT exam, but for the work as well. Work, yes, we need to get involved in the work at every stage. We are busy, we are already tackling a lot of things. And on top of that, CTA, the exam which we need to prepare for when we are part of so many study groups, and especially the daily study group that we have, we all know that, right? And I'm assuming all 3 of you must be part of those study groups. Now, after all of that, traveling, projects, working with a product partner, Salesforce, what encouraged you to take part in this difficult journey? Like you already told us about your motivations, like how did you get motivated? Who told you about it? Where did you hear about it and everything? But what made you think about taking this path or journey to become a CTA, even though you were already occupied with a lot of stuff around being an architect? Right, so we can start with Emily. What made you think, okay, I can just start on this path and this is what I want to do, even though I'm just surrounded with a lot of things?
So the traveling part, yes, I 100% agree. When I was preparing for my CTA, I was doing a program which was a global rollout. And in that year, I traveled to 24 countries. I was literally on a flight every second week. It was that crazy. So we'll talk about that. But what motivated me to do the CTA was, I was already learning quite a lot, but and like Carl said, at that point there were 5 or 6 certifications to do, and I had done them. But then I looked at, I'm a person who likes to complete stuff, and the leftover CTA was niggling at me, right? It was like, oh, I'm not there yet. I haven't done everything. So that was one thing where I started exploring the possibility of it. But then when I started exploring the possibility of it, like I said, I looked up to people who had already done their CTAs, and how much credibility they got just with the certification. You know, I'm not saying architects who don't have CTAs are not equally good. They are, right? But the certification brings you like an instant credibility with your customers, with your peers, with your teams. You know, your voice has, let's say, more weightage. Your opinions have more weightage when you have this title attached to it. And I think that was one of my key motivations. And just very personal to my circumstance, how many women architects have you seen? Like when I started my career, you know, 20 years ago, you never saw a woman architect in a room whiteboarding. Like I was always the only one. I never had another colleague who was an architect, right? I don't think that's changing now, and we've got far better representation, but not enough. We've got work to do. But for me, again, there were circumstances where my colleagues would get a better reception to their ideas, whereas I wouldn't. So like they say, a woman has to work more to prove that credibility, especially in a scenario where architects don't look like her, right? Or she is the only one in the room and everyone else is speaking over her. How do you establish yourself as a leader in a room? So it was all about credibility for me, you know, gaining access to maybe situations where if I wasn't a woman, I would have gained access to anyway, but I needed to go through a CTA to get into forums, you know. But I'm not complaining. I think it was a good thing. It was a good motivation for me to just go and say, okay, I know I'm a good architect, but then how do I get it written down on paper that I'm a good architect? I think for me, it was just a journey to get a certification for what I already knew I was good at.
I think you start to understand yourself when you're on the journey, because the way you evolve when you're on the journey, the credibility is just then an official letter afterwards. But when you are on the journey, you're learning, you're seeing different things, different scenarios. I think that changes you. I can feel myself. I am on the journey.
Yeah. The learning is more important, you know. Definitely, you learn so much. You tend to go into so much depth when you're preparing for these kind of review boards, and also you discover and you explore so much, which maybe you wouldn't look at every aspect as part of a project that you're doing, but as part of CTA, you're almost forced to look at aspects that you would never have looked at otherwise. So the learning is definitely worth it.
I cannot agree more to that. Like, yes, 100% true. And credibility at the end is just a matter of getting something, but I also understand as a woman is equally important to get that, and so that you are on a stand and you can talk about things, you're given a chance. So yeah, that matters. So how about you, Sam? How did you come to a conclusion that yes, you want to go on this journey after all that pressure or work pressure that you have?
Well, I didn't have kids, I don't think, at the time. Oh, I did have I had one when I started my CTA journey. I was working at a telecoms customer, and I'd been there for quite a while. And like I say, I was working with the two architects I mentioned earlier, and sitting down with them, talking to them on a daily basis about the technical challenges that we were facing. And they were complex, the challenges. They involved a lot of sort of multi-dimensional considerations in one domain or another, whether it be security or whether it be, you know, integration or whatever. And I knowing that they were architects and they were on this journey, and I felt like I was talking to them on a level. So I felt like, well, they're at a level that I think is, you know, inspiring. I feel like I'm operating at the same level in the considerations I'm making. There were very few occasions where I would, propose something to them, an approach or a solution, and they would say, no, actually, you might want to look at doing it this way. And that included how I was justifying the approach I was taking. So when I heard that they were on their journey, they said, no, you'd be fine. Much like Emily said, you'd be fine. And I thought, really? And then the more customers I spoke to, and I said, I'm a technical architect, Salesforce technical architect, some of them initially were saying, are you a certified technical architect, a CTA? And I had to say no, obviously. But that happened again and again and again and again and again. So even though I was probably operating at that level, it was getting a little frustrating to say no every time. So that then became the mission, right? It was like, I don't want to have to say no again. So very similar to what Emily said, is when I started the journey through their encouragement and their inspiration, it was then I absolutely want to achieve this because I believe this is then me able to say yes, and actually have that credibility at the same time, rather than rather than people work with me and then go, oh yeah, well, he clearly is, but he's just not got the cert. It actually makes it easier to say yes, I am. Yeah. So that was where it came from, mainly.
Yeah, to be able to sit up in a room and establish yourself as a true architect credential, like it really is, because we know how we struggle to reach there. So yeah, it shows. How about you, Carl? How did you decide to become one?
I think I didn't quite know what I was getting into. It probably is the honest answer of at the time. I think I saw the challenge of going for something like that, a challenge that initially when I started working with Salesforce, it didn't seem even attainable. It didn't seem like there was a path, a guide, things to do to lead you there. And like I said, the introduction of the designer exams and the pyramid, and then I actually did 601 before it was a real thing, the second or third trial class, and that really solidified it for me of a lot of this is about communication and presentation. And then as I was preparing, I found the things I was preparing I actually used the next day on the job. So the correlation of what I was doing to prepare and the direct impact on my work performance and the things that I had to do, that really said, yes, this is the right thing. This is the right mountain to tackle because it's going to be completely applicable to what I'm going to do every day. So that kind of helped fuel me to get over that last hurdle, that last push to go and do the review board. And like everyone else mentioned, yeah, there was one CTA that was in the 601 and we did a little bit of mocking there, Andy Oganoff, and he said, yeah, it looks, I think you're ready. You should go for this in the near future. And that kind of gave me the confidence to say, all right, let's schedule this for December and give it a shot.
All right, so you went for it and you were already evolving while you were on the journey. So you just let in and then decided it. That's interesting. So now that you came to know about it, all three of you decided to give it a go and you started your journey, but then I'm assuming, yes, you all were preparing for it after hours, after office hours, sometimes on weekends or holidays. You gave it all. So you must have got these questions from the kids. Hey, mom, dad, what are you doing? Like, it's a holiday. It's after office hours. So how did you explain the CTA thing to your kids? What did you say? What are you doing? How did you make them understand?
So I actually, if I may jump in there, I actually asked my son yesterday, what did you understand when I explained it to you? And he actually gave me a quote, if I can read it out. He dictated to me and I typed it up at the same time. He said, CTAs are a group of people who help make networks and systems and also work on tech. Like climbing a mountain, and everything you do is one more step towards the top. You have to gather lots of knowledge and do mocks and study with others, which is like a human pyramid where everyone's helping to keep the structure together. That's what he said. Notably, I then realized that both my kids forgot a lot about what I had said and explained to them that CTA was. So it wasn't.
From the code, they quite understand it, and I guess they're already motivated for becoming CTAs.
I'd hope so.
So they understood it. How about you, Emily and Carl? Like, how did you explain? Were there any layman language you used, or just technical stuff they understand?
When I started my prep, I think my son was about 4 or 5 years old. So he would definitely not have that comprehensive a definition like Sam gave. But what I had to tell him was, just like he went to school and he had a little bit of homework to do and he had tests sometimes, mommy was going to go for a really big test, which would take a lot of months to do. And it would also take mommy some time off her office hours to do the prep off. And he was like, but why is it important to do the test? And I said, well, because I want to be really good at school, and then I'll get lots of gold stars, because that's what they were on, gold stars in school for good behaviors. And so I kind of explained it to him with his chart. And then the funny part was, every day he would come and ask me, how many stars did you get today? Like, how much prep did you do? So yeah, we kind of gamified it for him to say, I have to go through this prep. But as he grew, over that year of prep that I did, I engaged him in a lot of ways. He loves doodling. So sometimes when I'm preparing, he would come into my room and he would saw me drawing landscape diagram, and and he would be like, but that's so ugly, mommy, you didn't even draw the line straight. And I would be like, yeah, let's draw it with you. And I would actually do the same landscape diagram again with him quite neatly, and it would give me practice. It would involve him in what I was doing. And he would draw some doodles and cartoons on it. So it was quite difficult to explain what the CTA was to a 4-year-old. But I just explained to him like a test, which mommy needed to pass. It was very important, because then I'll get a gold star at the end of it. By the time he grew up, he understood a little bit that it wasn't really a gold star. It was more, it was maybe something more, but he couldn't quite get what that more was. But then he said, it's just going to make your boss happy. I said, yeah, that's it. Let's go with that. So yeah, there were multiple definitions of change that happened, but it was quite interesting. But what I did do was I did involve him quite a lot with my ugly drawings, which he critiqued, and he found massive pleasure in knowing that mommy is not as great as doodling as him. So it was a nice, healthy competition.
Right. So you've got a smart kid. Elsie would have asked to hang that star somewhere on the holidays on the tree. Say, hey, you got a star on the exam, right?
Yeah.
So how about you, Carl? How did you make them understand about your studies?
Yeah, for me, probably the younger ones, I didn't, they weren't necessarily cognizant, but the school age ones, it was definitely related to school, that it's work that you're doing and studying and preparing for different types of exams. For me, I would also break it into 2 different phases. There's kind of the background phase, where you're learning about different things, you're doing parts of diagramming and work, you're getting the background knowledge that was more transparent to the family. Like it didn't take me away as much. And then I had kind of my last push before the board, and that lasted from beginning of September till the beginning of December. So, a 3-month push. And that's the one that definitely had the impact on the family. And that's where, if you're going to go for the review board, you need the three aspects of your life on board. You have to have your work committed, and that may mean support in money, in travel, in not traveling for work, and having some time away from work to do different things. You have to have the support of your family, any significant others, kids, to say, there's going to be times where I'm not going to be available. In the US, we usually take our kids trick-or-treating on Halloween, where they go around door to door dressed up in costumes and get candy. I missed that year because I was in Atlanta doing the CTA 601 class. Normally over Thanksgiving, we take a nice break. I studied over that. So there definitely was an impact there. And then the last part of that, the three, is yourself. You have to be committed. This isn't like, oh, I'll go try this new business analyst exam on Monday, and if I don't pass, I don't pass. I'll try. No, like, you have to put the effort in. You have to be on board with doing it. So with those things in place, there was times where it impacted my family, but I also then tried to minimize that. What do I mean by that? I would get up early before work, before the kids were up, 5 a.m., 4:30, and do work then. I would, work the day. I would do the kids' activities in the evening. The younger ones just wanted to play. The older ones would, need taken somewhere for whatever was going on. And then after they went to bed, work again. So I tried to flex that time so that the family still got part of me. But then there was other times where they missed out, but tried not to skew it so that it was all the family being impacted.
Yeah, it's really difficult because you miss out a lot of family fun, and especially when it was during the holiday season, it becomes really hard. So what is important for this journey is to be committed and the perseverance that comes with it. So how did that come? Because sometimes when I'm preparing, I'm in the mock, my family is doing some other stuff, and I really, really feel like I should go and join them, right? It's really hard. So what during the journey made you like motivated, kept you on it, like, yeah, I should continue? And how did you balance that out at that point of time when you were away and doing your stuff and family was away doing the celebration or whatever? How did you manage that?
I guess I can start. I think it's a matter of what phase you are in. I think I had a relatively short kind of final push phase where I was really all in, and it wasn't that difficult to make those immediate sacrifices because it was short term. If I was trying to do that for 18 months, it wouldn't work. It would have to be a different preparation schedule where I was doing less of certain things, like, okay, I'm not doing 2 mocks a week, I'm doing 1 a month, and that's okay. You have to fit it in to what the priority is in your life at that time. And what I mean by that is, you make time for what's most important to you. If it's a need for a family, you stop the other things and you do what the family needs. Right now, like, it would be harder for me to go to the board than when my kids were younger. I thought it was a busy family life. Yesterday, a perfect example. So my kids are swimming over the summer. I'm running all the tech. So from 4 o'clock till 9:30 at night, it was preparing for a swim meet, going to swim meets, running the results. Like, I didn't have that much of a commitment. Yes, I was coaching hockey and doing other things, but in retrospect, I had a lot more free time when the kids were younger to do it than now that they're older. That doesn't mean that if we all agree as a family, this is the most important thing, we wouldn't make time now. It's again, what's your most important priority and what's the time frame that you're working on?
And there were probably fewer of them than back in the day as well. Because I'd definitely say that is that's the reality of it. It takes dedication and commitment, and when you've got fewer commitments, that's easier to do, right? So say, on one hand of the spectrum, having kids is, and balance, establishing a balance is hard, but having no kids or having not having a partner, or even if you were a single parent looking after a child, that would be very, very difficult to be able to manage the CTA journey under those circumstances. It'd be, very, very difficult to manage because you are the one and only there, unless you've got a support network around you, and that is equally as important. I would say very similar to Carl, I wouldn't say that for my board I attained balance at all. I took a very similar approach. So very early mornings and late nights studying and doing mocks, and small windows at the end of the working day, because I was still working, to spend time together was about all I could afford. And I accepted that I needed some time to decompress because it was all consuming, as you go through the journey. Before then going back to it, during my retake, where I did find a balance with the help of my partner, and actually talking about what they're trading off against each other. And I made a list of all the things that I would need to balance. And it was study, obviously, mocks, obviously, family time, exercise, mindfulness. I think there was a question in chat just a minute ago about energy levels and keeping that up. Mindfulness and exercise are, two of the ways that I did it. More study, can't get away from it. Sleep, figuring out how I was gonna tackle it, the skills that are involved in those, and just about developing those. Decompression I mentioned, and eating as well, and looking after yourself. The balance, all of that. And if you're not committed to one or the other, it was what I came to realize. So I definitely established more of a balance in my retake. Still struggled with a number of things, and these are, this is the biggest challenge to my kids or my family, because inbuilt in that is the fear that there's an implication that I was communicating that they were less important in some way than what I was doing, and that's a horrible feeling. Accepting that I'd be missing, like Carl said, being part of memories or key events in their life, that at that stage, I know that they would want their dad to be going through with them, if you see what I mean. And the other side of it is accepting that actually I was the cause of what I was doing, was the cause of additional pressure or burden on, because they were having to pick up a lot more than, of the rest of the running of the house, while I was, committed to something else that they hadn't necessarily asked to, right? So I definitely think the main impact in my situation was on my partner, and then the kids. But like Carl said, that was probably in that order deliberately to minimize the compromise and impact on the kids, if you see what I mean. Where a bit of soul searching and sort of, I think you said it before, Neha, about under yourself and why you're feeling these things, and accepting and convincing myself that actually it's okay to be selfish for some time, as long as that time is sort of read, and and why you're doing it and what it takes is communicated openly to those around you, was what helped me.
I mean, yeah, I agree. It's totally fair to take care of yourself and others at the same time, and to give that last push. Yeah, I'm almost there. Let's just do it. That attitude helps a lot at that point of time, and especially with your partner also pushing you to do that, and then children will be fine. But yeah, it's hard at the same time. So I would like to ask, like, in your whole journey, like, what was the most hardest part when you became a a CTA, not just that, but in the whole journey, which one was the hardest part, especially with respect to your children? Like, how did that affect your journey in some way, or any impacts?
I think I can jump in on
Yeah.
that one. So similar journey, like Carl and Sam said, you can't do it for a year or 18 months, right? It's the last push, and my last push was pretty short as well. 3 months. I think the last 3 months were intense, but before that, I did exactly the same thing: early mornings, late nights. If I got, like I said, I was traveling a fair amount for work. So I actually use my airport time, flight times as well for a lot of the studying prep. I also prioritized what was important and literally compartmentalized my life at that point, at least for the last 3 months, where the only things I decided to do was work, eat, play, exercise, and CTA, right? Unfortunately, my friends and the social life had to suffer the most. I think it was quite difficult and we were pretty socially active, like we had something or the other every weekend. And then suddenly, for 3 months, you disappear from your social circle, like you're missing in action. But I did actually call up my friends and I explained to them that I was doing something I really needed to do it for my career and myself, and that it's a short-term thing. So I'm sorry about missing, whatever's happening in the next few months. And I did. I think my priorities were simple. If it's my son and his activities or something important, that comes first. Then comes CTA and the prep and the time I need to devote to it. And if I have to completely do away with every single social aspect outside my family during those 3 months, that's what I did. So I think that was difficult. Not meeting people, not saying no to invites that came in for the weekends, and also the support from my husband, my partner. I think that's where I felt the most guilty, because he really did take on a lot in the last 2 to 3 months: pickups, drop-offs, activities, taking to swimming, taking to football, cooking dinners. It was amazing. And I felt guilty because we're a 50-50 household, and I wasn't doing my 50% clearly at that point. But yeah, that's I knew it was short term. We had agreed that that's what, as a family, we wanted to do, and we wanted to work towards one of my goals, and that's what we did as a family. So I think it's very important to have that support system with you.
Yeah, that's very important. And you raised a very important point that I wanted to ask, was about guilt, because sometimes you're low, you're sad because the mock did not go well, or you failed, you had a reattempt some year, right? And you might not be in your happy mood every time, or that would reflect on your children, or you're not able to contribute towards the other household chores, so you might feel guilty about it, right? So that guilt or that mood swings, they definitely have an impact on the children, because they reflect your mood. Like Poonam has also mentioned that in the comments, and I wanted to ask, how did you manage that guilt or mood difference in your day-to-day life?
I thought it was important to say it, basically, because I think by to cover it up or trying to sort of put a different spin on it or something like that would understand, first of all, that it's okay, and the second thing is that they wouldn't understand how to deal with it themselves. So I was just quite open with them, and I said, I didn't have a good study session, I didn't have a good mock, I'm a bit disappointed, or I'm a bit upset about that, but I'm gonna think about it. I'm gonna maybe replan it, and have another go, and think about it a different way. I, quite honestly, I don't know whether that had an impact on them or whether they changed their view. But I would definitely say, because I was going through it, it has helped me explain to them a lot about the value of work ethics, tenacity, dedication, overcoming fears, dealing with failure, and more emotion. Like I said before, the hardest part was having to say no to them when they wanted time from me, or missing out. Sorry, I think is my missing out on some of those events. But saying to them, I'm not happy about that, but I have to do this, is important for them to understand that actually sometimes you're not going to be doing things that you enjoy or you want to be that way, but you have to do it.
Yeah, so you took this as an opportunity to set an example in front of them, and at the same time also think about the strategies, how you are going to tackle it in a different way or plan it for your next set of preparation. That's a really great mantra for all the parents out there.
Yeah, I took a very similar approach. I think being transparent is the best thing. There's no point masking it or telling them any other story. It's like, I failed my mock today, and I looked at it and I can do better, but to do better, I have to go study more. And it becomes a part of the discussion. And then I think for me, it also served as a let out. When I said it out to my son, I felt like, isn't really a big deal. I shouldn't be so upset about it. It was mocked, yeah, but I know I have a strategy to deal with it. So sometimes just saying it out loud and explaining it to a non-judgmental kid in front of you is a great way of self-therapy. It helped me. It helped me when I explained it out loud and I talked about, well, this is what I'm going to do about it next. And then I got a few suggestions from him as well, like how I could improve my drawing, obviously. Of course, that helped. And I also got study tips from my son, like how he memorizes times table in school, so that was very important, of course. But it all helps because it lightens it up, and it actually helps you get over it rather than, brooding inside with the negative feeling of how miserably you failed your mock exam. So in a way, transparency is the best policy, I would say.
Correct. And
it is true. What they say is a problem shared is a problem halved. And it is true.
Right. Right. And what they say is, it's not about what you teach your children. It's about what children teach you about. That's more important, because what you learn from them is what you propagate, right? And that reflects in your behavior in everyday today life. It's really important to be transparent and truthful to the children. That's a wise thing that you said out there. So now we know that how you started and how you managed to explain that to your children, how it reflected on your day-to-day schedule and everything. Did you also were part of course, you were part of daily study groups, but did you were part of study groups that were also parents? And how did you all manage your time together to study?
I actually was part of no study group at all. So unfortunately, in 2017, when I was preparing, I don't think study groups were that big a thing, or maybe I was just new to the ecosystem. I didn't know anyone, but it didn't exist really at that time. Study groups are, and like I said, with the emergence of the pyramid and a very well-defined path to CTA and a lot more CTAs out there, I think now study groups are a thing, and support system and ecosystems are a thing. I wasn't part of any study group. All I had to take out time was for mocks with other people. And that's it. Sometimes I would reach out to people to have a one-off discussion, CTAs I knew, or get a little bit of a motivational speech when I was really going down the drain with my motivation. But apart from that, I really didn't have group study as part of my prep.
It's quite prevalent now these days because it's really a motivating factor. Like you yourself, if you're not getting motivated, your study partners will definitely do.
I wish I had. I wish I did my CTA now, with the kind of support and the amazing people that we have in the ecosystem who are helping everyone come along. It's great. Unfortunately, I didn't at that point.
But you eventually were fortunate enough to become a CTA without that. So again, hats off to you. So I know, Sam, you were part of the study group, and did your other peers were also parents? How did you manage time with them, or they manage time with you? How was it? How were you operating?
Well, interestingly, the first 2 times I took the review boards was before in Carl, actually, and I completely agree. There were no study groups. So I was my own side of working time, in my own personal time, and for me, it didn't work. It was just difficult to try and balance everything. With the most recent time, because study groups are now a thing, like you say, and it's been in the last few years that that's come in. And is more prevalent in the ecosystem. I was part of a study group. I sort of study with others who were parents knowingly, let's put it that way. It was only because through conversation, when we were sort of organizing, study meetups or whatever it was, I've got to go and pick up my son from school, or I've got to do this, or I've got to do that, so I can't meet at that time, I got to know that they were also a parent or had other commitments, and you start to talk about it. But it wasn't like a proactive, deliberate action to study with other people who were parents. No.
All right. So
sorry, and then for me, I didn't do study groups. Don't know if they existed. I think there's a little bit coming out, 601 classes. Again, you have to find what works for you. If I think back to when I was in university, and when I would mostly study on my own, when there was group things, I was usually answering more questions and getting questions answered. So sometimes it was good to kind of quiz your knowledge, but it just wasn't as effective. I could find, if I spend an hour on my own, I got an hour done with what I wanted. If I spend an hour with a study group, I got 10 minutes on what I wanted. So this isn't like don't use study groups, but find what works for you. For some people, it's fantastic, and that's the way you want to prepare, and that's great. Others, don't feel like you have to do a study group because everybody else is doing it. Everyone has a different prep method and a method that is leading to success for them.
Yeah,
that's absolutely right. Because everyone's preparation and learning method is different. Yeah, like I would say, don't feel under pressure. Because I am one of those people who join study group for fun rather than learning. I love the social element of it, but I don't think I'll get a lot out of it because I'm just too distracted with the social side of it. But I can get a lot done on my own. So again, I think we're going from one extreme to the other. When probably Carl, me, and Sam, did our mocks, we had no option. So we didn't do study groups. But now there are options, but then we might be on the other extreme where people feel the peer pressure to join a study group when maybe it's not their style of learning. So I would like to say, definitely focus on how you learn best during the journey, and go with what you do best, because it's finally your journey.
Yeah, because nowadays the things are so vast. Not just having the project experience and appearing in front of the board is not enough, because I might think of a scenario in a single direction, but my peers might have a different approach to it. So that social element is, I guess it's necessary, because things are so vast now. I might not know a stuff or two, and if I am in a study group, I might know it from them, right? So yeah, it totally depends on an individual that, yeah, if you've already been part of such projects that you've covered it all and you have enough to come up with a robust solution, you think in that direction, that's totally fine. But if not, then it's really good to have a study group so you can, thinking in all the directions that you never thought before, right? Oh, all right. So now that you had those struggles, you were motivated enough, you went for the board and you were like, go get it, and you became the CTA. Now let's talk about how did you come back to your old life after becoming a CTA? Like, how did things get back to normal, and how or if your parenting style changed after that, and how do you spend time with your kids after becoming a CTA? Like, because you were busy with your preparation, your schedule, your whole day was abnormal. You were in calls or you're traveling. Now, after becoming a CTA, how it's different? Is it become normal or more abnormal? How is it?
I definitely had a lot more time after CTA. My evenings were freed up. My weekends were freed up. My mornings, I didn't have to get up in the morning to prep. So I definitely felt like a huge weight has lifted off, and I could do the things I enjoy. So yeah, I think, again, like Carl said, I did a little bit of a sprint to CTA in 3 months. That was the intense piece. So I always knew that was short term and that was not sustainable any more than a couple of months. So yeah, it was 3 months of really high intensity, which I ended with a nice holiday. and yeah, I just had a lot more time after that to get back to the normalcy of pre-CTA.
Yeah, I think I got another quote from my eldest boy. He said, normal would be sharing out the period of time between the kids and work. So now I can spend time with them when he's with them. So yes, that was his statement. And I said, I agree.
You couldn't have said anything else because you have
exactly. But I mean, what happened after CTA? I painted my house and I made a start on the long list of jobs that had built up while it was preoccupied. That's what I did. So yeah, it was back to normal.
Right. So there were so many things that you might have parked, like, okay, this is something, this is not priority right now. CTA is priority, later, and now the bucket is full with a list, right? So how do you manage that after becoming a CTA? And especially for you, Card, it was like, it must be a long list, right? Because you prioritized it apart from everything else. Your holiday season was gone and you were like in a new year after December. How did that feel and how did you manage to overcome that?
Yeah, I built them an outdoor ice rink in the backyard because they were into hockey. So it's, I think it's the kind of the immediate, yes, you have more time. I don't know that parenting style or things I do changed because of CTA. It's changed as I've aged, as my kids have aged, as my kids have needed different things. I'm less shy about asking for the personal things, or this is going to sound harsh, but demanding the personal things from work of like, no, I need to go do this. Like, no, I cannot be in Paris this week. And it's literally this week because there's commitments I made before you said this was something you wanted to go do things at the swim meets. Now, it doesn't take away some of the guilt. You still feel guilt for making those statements for work, but I'm less shy now of asking and advocating for myself in the work environment for the balance that I want to achieve, knowing that I have the CTA to fall back on, right? Like that's what I look at, is it's giving me more freedom to choose and feel confident that if I'm not in a situation that will provide the balance I want, that I can go seek out a different situation that will. So that's what one of the things I think that has changed after becoming a CTA.
That's literally, I guess, everybody in this call who wants to become a CTA wants to fall back on something if nothing goes their way. And of course, the confidence and the level of knowledge that comes with it is definitely a primary one. But the things that you said about having to fall back on or to advocate for is really cherry on top of the very delicious cake that you have. Right. How about you, Samir? How did that change your life after?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So I completely agree with Carl there. Did it change my parenting style? No. Like I said earlier, I think one of the things that it did give me is a vehicle through which to teach my kids by example of, you know, of all those qualities that will get them through, you know, similar challenges. And I sort of, you know, frequently go back to that, and they come back to me and they say, well, you did it, you know. So I'm like, okay, you can do it then. You know? So I sort of enjoy that that freedom to be able to talk to them about those difficult situations. I guess that's what's changed for me.
Yeah, because you've just gotten removed a big obstacle in front of you, so you can just tell them how to do it. And again,
yeah, it's really liberating.
Yeah.
I will say,
feel...
I think, sorry, one sec. As they get older, I think they listen less to what you're saying and what you're doing, and they have to experience it themselves. So, you know, I look now like telling my 13-year-old, almost 14-year-old, oh, I did this. Look, you know, you look like, no, he's yeah, right, dad, whatever. He's gonna learn it himself, you know, this type of thing. So it does change from the younger to the older for sure. Sorry, go ahead, Emily.
Yeah, no, true. I don't think they really listen to what you say. The kids are programmed to tune you out, right? As a parent, I think they have specific radio frequency, like as they grow, they don't listen to you. But I think one important thing of preparing for a CTA or going through a learning journey, when you have kids and they see you going through it, I somehow feel it establishes the norm of learning for life, which is what I would love my kids to have. You know, for them to be able to look and say, hey, my parents are still learning. You know, they are still going for exams. They're still trying to set goals and milestones and working towards something. I'm kind of hoping that that would translate into a value of learning for them. And I'm hoping, because I don't know what my son will do when he grows up, but like every parent, I have hopes that you sow the seed and the right plant comes up. And that's what I feel. I know a lot of my values come from what I saw my parents do, not what they told me they do, but actually what I saw them do. And I'm hoping it will translate the same for my son as well. If he sees me in a constant learning curve, if he sees me constantly striving to be a better version of myself, or adding new skills, or, you know, just be on a learning journey, and normalizing it at home, that you're not the only one doing exams, you're not the only one doing classes, you know, it's your parents as well, then it becomes a way of life, right? And that's what you want to teach your kids. Like, learning is a way of life. You don't stop learning ever.
And I think I agree with that. My kids see it more as I go for other Salesforce or non-Salesforce certifications now, that, oh, dad's going to the test center for an exam today. Hey, how'd your exam go? Like, that continual aspect, I think, has been more impactful than the one-time CTA journey. You know, I didn't stop after CTA. I'm still going for exams, and I'll go for the BA exam when it comes out sometime next week. So, you know, it's that continual thing that you set the threshold for your kids.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I didn't stop after CTA as well. I went and did MuleSoft, and now I'm doing like an executive MBA course. So even this morning I was on a class for that, and you know, so it's like, yeah, okay, I'm doing these courses, and I'm constantly adding to my certification list, which is not necessarily CTA. CTA was a huge push. Obviously, everything else was easy after CTA, but I think it's the constant reinforcement of that value system of learning, which is important.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Because when we were kids, we were told, okay, you study till college, you study till school, and then you're done, you go to work, you earn money. And that's not the reality, right? It's better if they get to know the reality really soon, because learning should never stop. That's something we should always tell them. So yeah, that's really true. So now, one thing would you advise to your fellow Salesforce ecosystem trailblazers who are preparing for CTA? One single piece of advice as a parent that they should take care of.
As a parent, what piece of advice would I give a parent who's going to go through the CTA journey? Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
I'd probably say take the time to set expectations in what you need, time-wise, environment-wise, support-wise, with others. But the flip side of that is accept that there may be immovable obstacles from others and expectations that they have at the same time. So it's a bit of give and take.
Keeping the balance. Yeah.
I think mine's similar. Is you have to be explicit about it when you're working with your partner, when you're working with your family. Like it's not just you go and disappear. Like at the start of the process, what is it you think you need? I need 4 hours on a Saturday, and please take the kids to a park, or whatever it is. It's very explicit communication with them, with the kids. Like, yes, I'll go play with you in the yard after lunch or after nap, or whatever the parameters are. It's when you start making assumptions and just doing things in isolations where it all falls apart. And I would say that you have to be very explicit in what you're asking for and the ground rules that you're establishing for that period of time.
I'd probably also say, similar to that, is I see it as an anti-pattern if you were to sort of disappear into a box and isolate yourself because you need to stay connected to everything else. They need you to stay connected to everything else as well.
Yeah, I was going to say what Carl said, set your parameters, and the communication being very explicit is the most important thing. Everybody just has to know what the commitment is and what your ask is and what your ask of them is. But if I was to add another piece of advice to that, I would just say, accept that being a parent brings its own amount of variable into your journey, and just accept it. If something happens, your child is sick, you can't do anything about it. Something has happened, and you are set back by 2-3 weeks. Don't beat yourself about it. Just start with the expectations that CTA is important, but I would still say your family is more important than CTA. CTA can be done later, but your child health is number one priority, or whatever it is. If it's a very, very important birthday, or I don't know, an event where your child is maybe performing for the first time, these are the life first that you will never get back. The CTA retake is around the corner. So I would still say, priority wise, like I said, even when I was doing my CTA, my priority was always family, and I was prepared for setbacks, and thank God I didn't have any. But if there were to be any setbacks, I would accept them and say, okay, yeah, something that I prioritized in life happened, and that has set me behind. But then your CTA is not gone away. It's not that you can never do your CTA again. You can always do it, but some moments never come back. When your children grow up, you never get that time back. So So yeah, lay out your priorities very clearly on what's not recoverable and what's recoverable damage, and that will really help you clearly see through your journey.
That's a really important advice. Stay connected, be prepared, right? Right. So what we talked about the struggles, we talked about the difficult moments, advices, times. Now let's talk about the good times, right? What were the good times about your CTA journey? Did you have those good moments, aha moments while your journey or preparation, or maybe even immediately after becoming a CTA? Not everything is bad, right? Or struggle. There are good times as well.
I think for me, there was a point in time in the preparation where it switched from these designer exams and topics being little standalone topics to, wow, this stuff is really all integrated. And that was a very eye-opening moment of how you look at Salesforce differently and look at projects differently. And it's not, I need to do security here. I'm going to load the data. Oh, that affects share. Like it's so interconnected. And when I saw that integrated nature of it, that really changed the last push. And I think in many ways made it easier to be successful in the board because I really understood what it meant versus just like, here's some topics to learn in their own. So that was kind of my aha moment that changed the way I looked at Salesforce.
How
Yeah,
about
I mean, oh, sorry. Go ahead.
coming to you? How about you,
Oh,
Sandeep?
okay. Yeah, so I mean, for me, I struggled with time management quite a lot, and that I don't disagree with the interconnected nature of of the solutions and and even just the scenario itself, but that can also be quite overwhelming because like when you look at it from one angle, considering all the others at the same time can be a lot to sort of take in, comprehend, digest, and assimilate, and then output in a concise sort of format. So for me, the aha moment was less is more. Realizing that actually I didn't necessarily need to say everything to get across the message and the things that were material to the to answer the question. I think I also learned that being fast was not actually doing more in less time. It was actually based on doing one thing at a time and minimizing multitasking. Trying to do too many things at the same time was just killing me. And actually, one of the ones that I practiced quite a lot that I found was actually surprisingly you can leave decisions later than you think. You can actually sort of leave them quite late on before you actually make them, and then everything bring everything together at that point. And then I guess the other one I can think of is that you're probably already doing it. You just need to get out of your way and show it.
Right. It's really, there are different ways to do things. Yours might be different from the judge, and you should be careful what you're talking about and not open the can of worms, as they say. So it's an art to speak about what you're speaking about.
Yeah.
And that too, in the that amount of time pressure, it's a learning that you have to do, you have to practice. So yeah.
Becoming precise and concise is a skill that just benefits you through life, like not just for the CTA.
Right. I agree.
My aha moment was there were two very distinct ones. One, in my initial preparation, I was struggling with technique. And by technique, I was trying different things like, should I do PPT plus paper, handwritten notes and presentation, something else, So I was trying different methods and just wasn't getting it till I got to my method where it just clicked and I said, this is what I'm going to do, right? This is exactly how I'm going to do it. So that was when I got the technique right, which was to do with speed. The second one, which I still apply, is similar to what Carl said, actually. I started thinking of the domains as a framework for architecture in general. So when I say domains, the certification exams, the designer certs, like think about integration, think about app design, think about integration, think about security, think about sharing and visibility. So all of these I started using as a framework for every single solution that I was designing during my prep, after my prep, even today, when I look at a solution, I say, is this a complete solution? Does it have all of these definitions that we needed to think about? So I think that is something that stuck to me, how my brain perceived the whole, kind of the sections that you do in CTA as a framework in itself for architecture. And I thought that was very powerful for me.
Right. It definitely changes the mindset and the way you see things and you develop. Right. So now that we have the advices and everything, you being CTAs, you must be mentoring, judging, or observing a lot of people who are going to go on their CTA journey, or they are already going to appear, right? So what is something commonly wrong that everybody is doing, which you might have observed, or anything that they should not do, or many people are doing and you observe? Anything?
People are trying to be too perfect on their mocks. make as many mistakes as you want to on your mock, or experiment during your mocks, early mocks especially, I think is the biggest thing. And especially when people do mocks in groups these days, some people are almost scared of that failure, and they want to come out as credible to the group, which is fine. But remember, the reason you're doing a mock is because you're learning and you're prepping. And the more mistakes you make, the more feedback you get, and the more feedback you get, the better you are. I know there was a chat commented there to say, well, if you've got a really strong feedback, and you're really upset about it, what do you do? I would say, if you've got a really strong feedback, thank the person, they really care about you. And the second thing is take it very seriously, because the more feedback you get, the more chances you have of you plugging in your gaps before you go for the review boards, and hence more chances you have of passing it. So one of the things I would say to people going for mocks or preparing these days is don't be afraid to fail, and don't expect to do well in your mocks. If you do well in your mocks, if you don't get feedback, you're losing out, because you don't know whether you didn't get a feedback, which then will come and bite you during the day of the actual review board. So yeah, be open to feedback, and don't take it too hard. Don't get upset about it.
Yeah. I say to my boys every day before they go to school, you got two things to do today: listen lots and learn lots. Those are the two things you've got to do today. And they get that instruction from me every day. You're probably right, they've tuned it out now. But I would say that to any mentees or people that I'm judging for mocks as well, is like, by all means, listen to other people, whether it's feedback, whether it's you're watching videos or other people do their presentations. Listen, learn from them, by all means, but you've got to form your own approach and your opinion on why you think that's the right approach. Don't say it because you heard someone else say it and they stood up to challenge really well from other people. That's not going to help you. You need to believe the way you're the way you're choosing to design your solution is the right way with your own justifications.
I think my advice would echo some of the things that were already said. There's little tactical things when I see mocks. A lot of times people will read the requirements back. You're killing yourself on time management. The precise and concise of talking about the mechanisms, the why, the justification, and then moving on. And then the big thing that you mentioned, Sam, about watching other people, and there was a recording of my review board, and like, oh, Carl wrote it out live, I got to do it that way. No, you find what works for you. I have a background before we even had anything to do with Salesforce or college, where I acted in plays and musicals and that stage presence, right? So that part suits me very well. But if that's not your background, nothing wrong with doing PowerPoint if you're fast that way. So finding what works for you. And Emily mentioned that around her practice of coming up with a framework. And I did something similar. There was the online application architect, system architect, which had a really good framework. And I used that framework as how I tackled a scenario and presented to the board. So that's what it's all about, is coming up with the training that it's now muscle memory. So you go in and you just execute without having to think about the mechanics of execution. You're focused on the specifics of the scenario.
Yeah, definitely. You choose what works for you best and do it is the key here. And now, looking back, you all have achieved the credential in various amount of times. And what would you have done differently if you would have done it today? Like Emily said, you would have joined a study group, right? So if you were doing it today, your preparation, or if you want to look back at your preparation, what would you do it differently? What would be that one thing?
I'm going to actually touch on what Emily said. Would I change anything? Me personally, through the journey, no, because I don't think I would have learned as much as I have done if I hadn't made the mistakes that I made. For my family and my wife in particular, who was the subject of countless OAuth descriptions, data model explanations, and all kinds of stuff when she least desired it. No, I would probably take a bit of time to know my audience and gauge the sort of environment that I'm in. There's definitely times where it was right to talk about the detail less, because even though it's consuming me every minute of every day, my family, whether it's my kids or my wife, they've already done a full shift of work or school, and now they don't know, they don't understand, and they don't care. So, stopping talking is probably the right thing to do in those circumstances.
How about you, Carl?
Yeah, I don't, and this isn't related to just the CTA. I don't spend a lot of time looking at, oh, I did that, I wish I would have done things differently, or, living in the past and regretting I didn't take this job. I kind of, have a short-term memory when it comes to things in the past. So I don't know that I would answer what would you do differently, but if I were to say, what advice would you give to somebody starting their journey? I would look at the time that you're planning to take for your journey, where you're starting from and where you want to get to, and not feel like you have to do it in 3 months or 6 months or have an artificial timeline, but to establish the timeline based off of where you think you need to be from where you are, and knowing that that focus period of time, it's going to have to be short. You can't spend 6, 9, 12, 18 months in this hardcore preparation, because it will burn you out. So that's the advice I would give to somebody starting now.
So you prepare for that preparation in advance, take it slow, and then boom. Just take that last time as
Yes.
hard as
So
possible.
if you look, if you break it into domains and you add communication and you do an honest self-assessment, like, hey, you know what? I have a fear of speaking in front of people. It's probably going to take you longer to be ready to go for the review board. And you should do things that have nothing to do with the review board to help you with that particular piece, whether it's being involved in an organization or, Toastmasters or whatever works for you. For if I draw my examples, being in front of people communicating, no issue whatsoever. So I didn't put any time in to prepare for that other than the specifics of precise and concise. So now I need a shorter overall duration because I did an honest self-assessment and say, no, that's a strength of mine to weigh on. If you're saying, no, I need to build that up first, well, maybe you're on an 18-month timeline and the first 6 months are not even CTA type activities to make you a stronger communicator. So that's what I'm saying is don't feel like, okay, I got all my designer certs, I need to do this in the next 4 months. No, look and come up with a realistic timeline, knowing that the hard push, if you've ever run for a marathon, you don't go and do 20 marathons, you train, and you have some hard training at the end and then a little bit of gap and you're ready to go. Like, you have to approach it that way.
Yeah. And obviously what works for you best.
Yep.
With that, right. So with that, we will conclude our session, but with one more question that everybody is waiting for is life after CTA. Now that you all have become CTAs, you are being expected a lot of different things from work, from people that you interact with. Sometimes you're being challenged with more technical questions and you're expected that, hey, you're a CTA, you must know everything, like you're a god, right? So how does that impact you and how do you respond to that? And overall life after CTA, like everybody wants to know that. Good, bad, everything about it.
I expected a massive change. Nothing happened. I'm still waiting for it. No, kidding. So yeah, I know people see CTA as this cliff that they have to get to, and then they think, oh, I'm just going to. There's nothing beyond that cliff. They don't think beyond CTA. And yeah, there's no horns, no halo that appeared over my head, unfortunately. It's just another day I passed another exam. I think life after CTA is what you learn during the journey, right? By the time you get to that CTA, you pass it or you don't pass it the first time, you've already learned so much. The quality of architecture, solutions, your conversations has leveled up to a level which is just, it's become part of you and how you work. And it's become part of your muscle memory, and it's become part of your style. And that is what is life after CTA. So the exam is a great validation of your learning, but the learning and the journey is really what shapes life after CTA. How well did you learn? How well did you absorb? How much do you understand? How much in-depth knowledge you have is really what makes you the CTA role model, in what you're doing afterwards. And the other thing that CTA taught me was, yeah, that muscle to keep learning. CTA was not enough. Like Carl said, he's doing more courses, more certs. I'm doing things, I'm continuing my learning into different domains, into different platforms, into management, into executive leadership. So yeah, there's a lot to do. You just get that muscle of learning so sharp that I feel like that you don't want to stop. For me, it's like, I think CTA got me addicted to learning is the best way to put it. And I think that's yeah, it just puts you in that mindset of, right, I mean, this felt so good. And it gave me so much in my day-to-day that I just want to be better at whatever I pick up next, and look at it as a way of life.
So you must be like, now that I've done the CTA, I have potential to do more and gain that level of confidence.
Definitely gives you that level of confidence, yes.
Right. So when you initially said that I wanted that credential initially when you started your journey, so that when I'm in a room, I should be given that respect of being an architect. So did you get that in that room after becoming
100%.
100%?
100%. 100%.
Ever challenging, or did you feel a pressure onto yourself that, hey, now everything is up to me since I'm a CTA? Was it ever overwhelming?
Yeah, well, not overwhelming, but I would I always set boundaries, like just because you're a CTA doesn't mean you know everything. So it's a basic fact of life. No one knows everything, doesn't matter what credentials you hold, because there's always a perspective which is different from you, which is maybe better or not better, but it still gives you a new set of information. So I'm the kind of person who's always open to listening and taking on board the feedback. So by no chance do I assume that because I'm the CTA in the room, I have a better perspective or a better solution. I would invite people to come in with their own perspectives, their own challenges, and pick out the best from them. I think that's the way you work in teams. Have people challenge me? Oh yes. You know, that's what architects are for. If you're not getting challenged, you don't have enough smart people around you, then look for a new team, right? Because then you're clearly not learning. So yes, people challenge me. Yes, I have nice, lively, active discussions around solutions I used to have. But even now, when I work with my team, I let them go first. I would let them present their solutions first, and then I would apply my lens of finding gaps. So yeah, as you grow in your career and you get into leadership roles, if you want to get into leadership roles like me, where I'm leading a team of architects. So I don't really go in and do the solutions myself, but I still have the credibility and the understanding to go in, look at what they're doing, and point out, have you thought of that? Have you thought of that? How would you do this? You know, question and find gaps and poke holes in the solution that they're doing. And I think that's the beauty of being a CTA.
Really, that's a beauty, right? How about you, Carl and Sam?
Yeah, I don't think you start going for CTA unless you have a couple of things. One, that love of learning and continual learning, which continues after CTA. I think there's also an overlooked element of you take accountability for things. Whatever you're doing, you take accountability. It's not, oh, wow, you know, there's some DevOps problems on that project. Well, that's not my responsibility. Like if that's your mentality, you're not going to be a CTA and you're not going to be successful after CTA. So when those questions come up that you don't know, A, you want to go learn about it. And B, you have that personal accountability that you're like, I don't know, but I'm going to get the answer. So that is what continues you forward with it. From a being challenged, that's not a problem. Especially if you're coming from a place of humility. You know, if you're walking in the room like, I'm a CTA, I know everything. Yeah, you got a problem. You know, you should be approaching it from, I'm here to listen first. I want to understand. I want to understand your business challenges. I want to understand maybe what you've tried, what you're thinking, and then you integrate that into a solution. So coming from that effort of humility and making sure voices are heard and wielding your power with responsibility, then there's not a problem with being challenged because that always leads to a better solution. So I think it's been a good experience, but you have to have the right mindset for it. Sam?
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with either of those two explanations. Like you said, I don't think the journey ends after CTA. In fact, I'd be surprised if most people didn't find that actually what they take out of it are the skills more than the actual badge, right? But the humility was one of the biggest things that I was thinking about when you said the question. It's a key character trait that you'll see in a lot of architects. Curiosity is what really drives that sort of behavior of actually, before I say anything, I want to hear what someone else thinks, or I've got a challenge over here, but I don't quite understand how that works. That curiosity is absolutely powering the learning. That's for sure. And then the third thing I would say is, sort of echoing what Carl said about tenacity. It's the tenacity to actually understand it, but then also look to find out how to address that, or use the people around you to find a solution to it. So it isn't just there's a problem over there, I'm not gonna, I know it's a problem, but I'm not gonna do anything about it. It's, I want to know why it doesn't work, and I want to then find a solution. So yeah, similar to what's already been said.
Yep. You need to factor in all the considerations about the problem.
Yeah,
right?
But that stays with you forever, pretty much.
Right. Right. So with that, I would like to wrap up today's session. Any special piece of advice or anything else that you would want to suggest to our participants, to our audience today? As a parent, as a CTA?
It's hard, but talk about it. It is hard, but the best tool you've got is your voice.
Yeah, communicate, because that's one scoring section in the CTA exam, right?
I would say I'd say the days are long, but the years are fast. You get in the day to day, and it's a struggle, as a parent, working and everything, but you look back and you're like, wow, where are the years gone? So reflect on that as you go through it.
That's something everybody's going to remember. All right. With that, I would like to thank everybody, especially our panelists, to join today's session. We will upload the recording for all those who could not or attend the full session or want to watch it again on YouTube. And again, thank you everyone for joining today's session. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.